Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. It's been a while since I've done a solo cast, partly because I've had so many fantastic interviews and I've just wanted to share them with you all. So I hope that you've enjoyed some of the recent guests that I've had on. And I wanted to take some time to be able to share with you some of the things that have been on my mind, some things that I see a lot of clients struggle with this time of year with the holidays. It often is a time in which such a range of emotions are present with both expectations and obligations, coupled with family narratives and even childhood challenges or traumas get reignited during the holidays. And so what can often easily feel like it's supposed to be a joyful and peaceful and relaxing and fun and festive time of year can often result in a lot of emotional hardship, a lot of sadness, a lot of anxiety, quite the opposite of what many people feel are so festive during the holidays. So right off the bat, if this is a hard time of year for you, I just want to start with offering compassion and let you know that there is no right or wrong way of going through the holiday season. And hopefully throughout this episode, you will be given a lot of not just tools, but a lot of permission to make your experience yours. And ideally begin to find some not only self-awareness, but some ability to draw some boundaries and to set some current guidelines for yourself, perhaps releasing expectations from the past and how things have always been done, and allow yourself the permission to truly be present and conscious in how you decide you want to show up at this particular point in your life. And changing habits, changing patterns, readjusting expectations, whether they're yours or most importantly, other people's, is so much easier said than done. I'm not naive to think it's just give some tools and people are easily going to be able to enact them. I understand firsthand drawing boundaries, changing the way you do things, knowing that things are difficult and finding a new pathway through is not easy. And I also know that oftentimes it is fundamental to your overall mental and emotional health, to your self-care, and to your overall well-being. So while some of these things may be hard, remember it's an and. It's hard, and I can still practice a new way of showing up. And if I can let go of expectations to how either things have always been or the way people want me to be, I can hopefully get really attuned to what my actual needs are at this point in time. So again, starting from a place of compassion, if this is not a festive time of year for you, if this is not an easy time of year, if this is a time in which traumas get retriggered, expectations of family dynamics feel ungrounding and uncentering for you, I want to first, right off the bat, give you some practices and tools for you to be able to turn to when you start to feel overwhelmed, when you start to feel anxious, perhaps get a little bit flooded with emotions, because that ability to have the self-awareness of when you may feel that activation and then have some solid tools for you to be able to turn to is a really, really helpful thing. So often, again, easier said than done to enact them and practice. So some of these things are really, I would suggest beginning to start a baseline of practice when you are not feeling super triggered, right? Because sometimes self-care is really hard to access when you are already overwhelmed, when you already feel shut down, when you already feel flooded. It reminds me, and if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, it reminds me of when I was teaching mindfulness to kids many years ago, and I would go into each classroom and go through a breathing exercise I called it mindful breathing. I didn't call it meditation. Being in the classroom, I had to be really mindful of the language that I used in a school setting. And at the time, meditation was a word that could be very triggering for some, either administration or for some parents even. So calling it mindful breathing was a practice in which I taught kids, even as young as 3 years old, how to slow down and take a few deep breaths for the purpose of calming down the brain, calming down your body, so you have a greater ability to access your tools, your resources, to feel more present, etc. Well, the point I'm wanting to share with you is I went into all these classrooms one day. It was K through eighth grade. And I said, if you've been breathing from the moment you're born until the moment you die, why is this something you should practice? And one brilliant little 9-year-old girl, she was in 3rd grade at the time, she actually said, well, I imagine we practice our breathing for the same reason we have a fire drill. She said, we have a fire drill so we know what to do in case of an emergency. And I imagine that we practice our breathing so we know how to use it when we need it. I literally was in tears over her accurate and wise understanding of why we should practice our breathing. But this is really true for a lot of self-care tools, that it's really hard to plan for the emergency in the midst of the emergency. So if you can practice some of these tools, and we're going to start with breathing, of course, but if you can practice these at a moment when you're not triggered, then you are literally building the muscle of your brain, strengthening this as a resource for you to be able to draw upon when you are overwhelmed. It's really hard to build that muscle once you've already been activated. So if you can find moments in your day, it could be really, really brief, to just consciously take a breath in and consciously exhale out. Perhaps you want to say the words breathing in, breathing out. As you do this, perhaps you want to visualize something calming and soothing and peaceful that you are breathing in, imagining that image or that thought or that positive experience or emotion filling you up. And on the exhale, consciously connecting with what is it you want to release as you take your breath out? What is it you want to let go of? What is it that is no longer serving you? Consciously connecting with your breath allows your breath to be one of your most valuable tools wherever you go. And like I said, it's going to calm the brain, it's going to calm the body. And once you have that baseline of some centering and some grounding, you have a greater ability to assess what you're actually feeling or to respond and not react to some particular trigger. So again, I know this is, even if you love the holidays and this is a super festive and fun time for you, but you still get that overwhelm, you still get that exhaustion, or even if you love it, but you feel drained by all of the get-togethers and you feel drained by how many people you have to spend time with or interact with, right? So that breath, regardless, is always going to be one of your best resources. And, in that, when we begin to practice these tools, what you start to gain is some self-awareness, because in that pause, it's going to help you see things a little bit more clearly. So when you start to feel that overwhelm, that emotional exhaustion, that draining, maybe that anxiety, perhaps a good helpful question is to ask yourself, what is it I'm really feeling right now? Right? Am I bringing up something from the past? Am I having some unrealistic expectation that I'm placing on myself? Am I worried about a particular family member or a particular interaction that I have to engage in? Because it's really easy to just label it: anxiety, overwhelm, dread, overdriven with expectations, or having too much on your to-do list. But sometimes when we use those same words over and over again, it tends to lose its meaning of what we're actually experiencing. So a helpful way in order to do that is to check in with your body. Like, what is your body actually feeling? Tuning into your physiology can be a great, more neutral observation to see, how are you holding what you're carrying, right? Do you feel a tightness in your shoulders or tension in your neck? Do you feel like your jaw is really sore, perhaps you've been clenching, or maybe you feel a pit in your stomach or an increased heart rate or just a generalized buzz in your body, feeling ungrounded. So getting a little bit more curious about what you're actually feeling, and then trying to label the emotion really accurately, seeing if, again, this is something that's coming up from the past or perhaps something that is really more present. I know self-awareness around the holidays might be a little bit trickier than other times because it's often fraught with so many narratives and so many stories and expectations. So it could be a little bit harder, but, and I should rather say, it doesn't mean it's impossible to try. So as you begin to practice more awareness, get curious with yourself of what are the things that you're doing consciously versus what are the things that you're doing out of obligation. And this is a really, really tricky one because usually during the holidays, we don't necessarily have the freedom to be able to only make a choice on what's best for us because we're usually interacting with a lot of different people. And while, as I often say, expectations are the quickest path to suffering, well, I still hold that to be true. I want to give some leeway around the holidays because we may not be able to get out of our obligations. We may not be able to completely alleviate expectations on ourselves or on others. So this is where self-compassion and grace and offering yourself some kindness is a really helpful way to soften perhaps what's difficult. Self-compassion is one of, I think, the most important practices to practice and often one of the hardest ones to do because our inner critic can be really, really loud. But the self-compassion during the holidays and around these obligations or expectations might be a really kind offering to yourself of just acknowledging this is really hard right now and giving yourself the permission for it to be hard and something that you can still engage in might just make it that ever slightly a little bit easier. When you have the expectation that you're supposed to enjoy it while it's hard and you just don't, let it be okay that that's what you're feeling, right? So that's one of the ways to be kind to yourself is to honor and allow and accept whatever your emotion is without judgment, without shaming yourself, without feeling guilty about it. And giving yourself the permission to feel the feeling and to still engage if that's what is required of you. Easier said than done. All of this is easier said than done. That is why it is always a practice. But this leads into another really important aspect around the holidays, which is setting boundaries. So setting boundaries tends to be one of the more difficult aspects in all different relationships because at the root of setting boundaries requires self-awareness to know what it is that you really need, while also managing someone else's needs of you. And oftentimes when we are in relationship with others, whether it's family of our family of origin, whether it's extended family, whether it's our current new nuclear family that we've created, or in-laws, or even if it's just friends, setting boundaries is a really, really, really difficult task because we're often afraid of hurting somebody else's feelings. Now, the challenge is when you are afraid to draw a boundary, for fear of someone being upset with you, for fear of hurting somebody's feelings, for letting somebody down, or perhaps, maybe this year you're just not feeling it and you need to really practice some self-care and make a choice that works for you, but may not work for somebody else. This is a really difficult task because we are conditioned to not honor our needs. And we are conditioned to be nice. And especially in the socialization of women, and the research backs this up, that by age 12, girls are conditioned to not really speak their truth, but to be nice. And this is a fundamental challenge that we have in being able to authentically express ourselves when we have the fear of being perceived as unkind, of uncooperative, as not nice, and we fear letting somebody down. And the challenge in drawing these boundaries is sometimes the person you're drawing the boundary with may not really support it because it has let down their expectations, or maybe they felt they needed you to be there to support them through something difficult. One of the most hard thing in relationships is when we get into that codependent nature or unskillful habits and patterns in which we put somebody else's needs ahead of our own. Now, of course, every relationship that we are in has some level of interdependency. That is why we're in relationship with people, even with friendships, with family members. Interdependency is necessary. That is the give and take of relationship. That is, when we show up and we offer of ourselves and we receive in return. The codependency is when it becomes unhealthy. The codependency is when you abandon your own self in favor of meeting somebody else's needs, which can only exacerbate this emotional exhaustion that can tend to arise, especially during the holidays. So if you recognize that you have these patterns in which you are abandoning your own sense of self in favor of pleasing others, only to have you feel depleted, drained, resentful, angry, irritable, anxious, depressed, that's a very real pattern for you to recognize. As always, easier said than done in engaging in new patterns, but it's got to start with the awareness. So I want to share a quick story. When my daughters were in elementary school, there was a mom that I knew at the school. And one day I saw her across the parking lot. And I honestly can't remember what happened right before this part of the conversation, or if it was just like a random spontaneous thing that she yelled across the parking lot. But what resulted was her saying to me, kind of in a joyful and exuberant and positive way, which was counter to what she actually said. She said, you're going to disappoint somebody today. And she said it in a way that had acceptance around it rather than self-judgment around it. And it became a little playful joke between her and I that pretty much for the rest of the school year, whenever we would see each other across the school parking lot, we would wave to each other and joyfully yell, "Go disappoint somebody today." And what it actually gave was permission to be human, that there is no way in which you can please everybody. And when you try to please everybody at the expense of abandoning your own self, it only builds, like I said, resentment. It builds frustration in the relationship, and it can start some unhealthy patterns of not acknowledging our own needs. So while I don't underestimate the impact of family obligations, I also want to offer that sometimes your self-care needs to be your highest priority. And if you are up against a situation in which boundaries need to be set and someone really doesn't support you setting the boundary, that might be some extra indication that the boundary needed to be set in the first place. And if you have an awareness that you are never going to please everybody, and if you begin to notice patterns in which you continue to abandon yourself in favor of pleasing others, you are doing yourself a disservice. And again, through the holidays, maybe that looks a little bit different. Maybe it's setting a boundary on how long you'll be somewhere for a family dinner versus expecting it to be the whole evening. Maybe it's setting a boundary of, I'm happy to go visit the family out of town, but I'm going to get my own hotel room, right? So I'm not suggesting that setting boundaries is an all or nothing. And the other key thing here to remember about setting boundaries is it is often the assumption that setting a boundary is telling somebody what we can't do or what we're not willing or not able to do. It's kind of like putting your hand up, talk to the hand, drawing a line on the sand. But a really effective way of drawing boundaries is actually when you make the declaration of what you are not in the space to be able to do, you offer an alternative. So if you say, hey, I'm not able to come out of town and stay at your house, but I will come out of town and get my own hotel room. Or, I'm not able to spend the whole evening, but how about we meet for lunch? Or I'm not able to host all these people, but how about I help you with the cooking, right? So you're not just telling and pushing people away, but you're making some accommodation in which you're able to honor your own needs, be in alignment with your values, while at the fundamental level, taking care of yourself. I'll say it for like the millionth time already. This is easier said than done, but it's a really helpful exercise in your own self-awareness and in your own healing journey to be able to be conscious around, what am I doing that serves me versus what am I doing that I've always done that perhaps no longer serves me? And where do I begin to make that conscious choice in how I show up and how I respond? And to be okay that someone may be upset with your choice, that is a reflection of their needs. And it's okay within safety and emotional differences in relationships to honor yourself. I know that families and holidays bring often out the worst in others. And what often should feel like a very connected time can feel like a very disconnected time. And so, look for the ways in which, even if they're small, you can also even give yourself the permission. If you are in a family situation during the holidays, what is your permission to take a moment of self-care? Maybe that's just taking a step outside. Maybe it's going for a short walk. Maybe it's, having a friend that you can text to say, hey, just send me some loving kindness right now. Send me some metta. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So even if you are in a situation that may not be serving your overall mental and emotional health, in which you are acting a little bit out of expectation of what is based upon, of what is expected of you, but knowing where are those moments, even if it's sitting in the midst of that family dynamic of it, whomever you're with, and just internally doing your own self-regulation, taking those deep breaths, consciously breathing in self-love and acceptance and loving kindness, and exhaling out whatever it is that's no longer serving you. This is all a practice. And what I'm hoping that you're hearing is that there's many different ways, from, whether it's drawing a firm boundary to practicing self-care in the midst of an overwhelming situation, for you to make it just a little bit easier on yourself, to give yourself that extra little intention of self-compassion, even if it's adopting a self-compassionate posture, just kind of putting your hand over your heart, or just gently giving yourself a hug. Maybe even, there have been times where I've been in the midst of difficult moments where I've had a crystal or a stone that I'll keep in my pocket, or so I can, reach in and just hold it between my hand and offer me some sense of grounding or ability to just offer myself that self-care. So, also understand that in these dynamics of family obligations during the holidays, perhaps you are recognizing that this year is different than others, and maybe this year you need to draw a different boundary. You can be clear to those that you're drawing the boundary with. You know what? This may not be forever. This is just what I need to do right now. And I know this may not make you happy. And thank you for supporting me, because right now this is what my self-care looks like. And again, if we're always looking to others to validate our practices of self-care, then we often will not be fundamentally practicing self-care, because we'll be looking for that validation from an external source rather than from receiving it internally. So I hope that this is giving you some insights, some tools, some awarenesses around how to gain more self-awareness of your needs, how to gain some tools to offer the self-compassion to be able to break free from expectations so you can consciously show up, recognizing that you cannot serve everybody's needs, and it is not selfish to practice self-care. You are not selfish for putting you first among everyone else that you are there to take care of. This is a very overwhelming time of year. The days are shorter, it gets darker, the weather can be dreary. There can be a lot of expectations financially with our time, with our gift giving, with pleasing others. And so I hope that in the midst of all of this timing, that you really extend some conscious time to yourself in being more mindful, in being more compassionate. And, another great thing to do is to always turn towards gratitude. Gratitude does not take away your challenges. It can help shift the lens of how you see things, so that way you have greater ability to respond to whatever challenge is in front of you. Gratitude is not a spiritual bypassing of just focusing on a positive outcome. You really do have to honor and allow the feelings that are arising. But gratitude can be the thing to help you dwell in the good when you otherwise feel like there's just a lot of hardships going on. So I wish you a very peaceful holiday season in whatever which way that looks like to you. And I offer you the intention for a mindful holiday season in which you are honoring and accepting whatever is arising as your truth in this moment, to stay present, to be able to practice that self-compassion, to come back into your breath, to not get so much caught up in rumination over the past, to not get so much caught up in, fearing what's to come next, to take it day by day, breath by breath, moment by moment. And just know that even if it's hard, there is a beginning, middle, and end to everything. And whatever it is that you're going through that may be challenging, you have 100% success rate of getting through it. The mere fact that you're here listening to this now means you've gotten through every single hard moment that you never thought you could. So I hope that you found this helpful. I would love if you give a rating or a review to the podcast, so we can help others to journey forward into living their best, most mindful and fulfilling, authentic, and aligned life. And if any of these tools that I mentioned sound great conceptually, but you are struggling on knowing how to actually enact, then I invite you to join my January cohort of the Journey Forward Method. The link is in the show notes. It is a live 8-week course beginning on January 11th, in which I walk you through step by step all of the best tools that I've been teaching my clients for the past 20 years. And this is going to be my core framework to help you get unstuck from the patterns, the habits, the mindsets that are keeping you spinning in the same dynamics that you keep engaging in, but yet hope for a different outcome. Because we all know that that's a definition of insanity, when we want something different to come out of our exact same things that we're always doing. And that, I know, is easier said than done. So I'm here step by step to guide you along the way in understanding how your brain and your body work, understanding what mindfulness means, and how to integrate all of these mindfulness tools, from presence and awareness and self-acceptance and compassion and gratitude and loving kindness, into your day-to-day routine, while at the same time consciously understanding your patterns, so you can be more aware in how you respond versus react, so you can actually live a values-driven, aligned life. So if that sounds like something you're really needing, then check out the link in the show notes. We begin January 11th. I would love to have you join me. And if you know someone who it may benefit, then feel free to please share the link with them. Thanks you guys so much for tuning in today, and take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.